All right. Hello, everyone. Good morning. Um, Welcome to, this is our home office slash FOSS studio in Oakland, California. Uh, just, uh, just in talking with teachers and other professional learning providers, we got inspired to try and replicate some of the things that we do in the classroom and see how they translate in distance learning. So I hope you will be patient, as this is the first time I'm trying to step away from that Zoom screen and actually try to do some hands-on. So welcome again, and we're going to get started. So you see on your screen, hopefully, the practices. Oops, I think I'm a little ahead of myself here. Let me go back one. All right, the practices. So we asked you to go and kind of the lesson that we're featuring today is first grade sound and light. And we wanted to start with an activity to activate prior knowledge and to also show that you can do these kinds of things with whatever is around, whatever students have around they can access, and it actually makes that learning more authentic for them. And you may have in your groups already started to ask questions. Maybe you're starting to construct some explanations about what is it that makes sound? Why does this certain instrument, or why when I take these two spoons together, what is making a sound? What's moving? And so we're starting to engage in the practices. And the practices, this is the core of science, right? We are supporting students in engaging in these practices, right? That's what our curriculum is based around. That's what the NGSS is about. And so when we're thinking about those practices, and this is the case obviously for all students, is there's corresponding language functions, right? Those cognitive tasks that students need to engage in order to actually do those practices. So as we're asking questions, that cognitive task is inquiring, defining, right? And then especially as we get into those more complex practices, like engaging in argument from evidence, we're talking about very high level cognitive tasks. Synthesizing information, negotiating, critiquing, right? All of these require a cognitive task and a language complex language to actually process and communicate. So this is where we want to focus our attention for all of our students, and especially for students that are learning another language, because this is where they're going to trip up, right? This is that academic language that we're helping students bridge from their everyday language or their home language. So I want to talk a little bit about how we do that with FOSS. So this may be a review for some of you, maybe something new. So again, we have 90 minutes, so I am going to go through this kind of quickly, but know that you can always contact us with more information about these. But the purpose is to give you a broad overview of the resources we have, because we have been focusing on language development for a very long time. It's embedded in instructional design. So that's why I start here with the investigations guide. So this is really the first place to look in those margins for those supports that are embedded for students in our investigation guide. Now, more than ever, given that we're in a distance learning environment, those digital resources are really important. And we have a lot there. And so these work well inside the classroom, in students' homes, well, maybe not outdoors, but to help bring that science learning into wherever students may be. And so things like using multimedia, and we're going to model a little of what that looks like. Using the e-books, we know that has exploded over this period where people are using e-books with students. Using the videos, using our teaching slides are a great way to make the investigation visual for students. So I just wanted to to know that this is the way to extend that learning to wherever students are. They can access digitally. This will be the focus for today, is something very dear to my heart, the Science-Centered Language Development chapter that we've spent a lot of time, and there's been quite a few iterations, and we're always updating this with what are the most effective practices for supporting not only language development, but literacy in general. So this supports, especially if you're interested in really doing that convergence between literacy and science. This has lots of ways to do that, lots of ways to integrate reading, writing, speaking, and listening. And then the section that we'll focus on is the section on how do we integrate the ELD standards to help support the science learning. Another resource we have is called the Access and Equity chapter. And this is a broader view. So it's not just looking at students that are learning English, but also other demographics that have been identified by the state and the federal education agency around students that are vulnerable, that may need more supports. So this is a great resource for thinking about more holistic ways of supporting students that are learning English, but might also be students who are in poverty, or may also be students who are disabled. So again, a way to include ELD students in the learning. And these research also, by the way, we have new videos that just came out, I guess it was earlier in the spring, that are based on these chapters and explain them, and there's classroom footage to give you an idea of what this looks like. And I'll actually be showing some of them on Thursday if you're coming to that seminar. So that's the Access and Equity around inclusion. And then on Thursday also we'll be going a little deeper into this resource, which is our ELD and California ELD and FOSS. And this really looks at prioritizing those ELD standards. So looking very specifically at how we do integrated ELD and how we do designated ELD using FOSS as the context for that language development. So we're really excited about this newer resource, and definitely looking for partners to help us in field testing some of these strategies. So actually, I think I'm going to pause for a second, and Natalie and Erica, if you wouldn't mind, I'm going to just let you kind of think about those resources for a second, and if you have some questions, you can put those in the chat.
So I'm going to link to these resources in the chat for everyone.
Oh, thank you. So yes, I put a folder on Google that has, it has the Science-Centered Language Development chapters for K2, 3, 5, and middle school. And also the Access and Equity chapters there. All of these are accessible on FOSS Web. The California ELD and FOSS is a little harder to get to. You have to go to the California Planning Guide, because this is very specific to California. But if you're in another state and you're interested in them, you can just let me know if that's the easiest way to do it, or you can change your settings to California. All right, so we are going, I'm going to go ahead and let Natalie and Erica, those questions that you put in the chat, we will be collecting those questions and making sure we get back to people about those. And all right, so I'm going to continue with kind of, I was calling this stages, but I've changed it to layers of implementing, because just in my experience with districts, every district's going about it in a different way. Surprise, surprise. I think the way this came was people were feeling a little overwhelmed. You know, I live in this realm of science and ELD, and I'm like, well, why isn't everybody doing this? And just appreciating and recognizing, of course, that there's lots of demands on teachers, and that even though it is a requirement for us here in California to be doing integrated and designated ELD, it doesn't always happen the way we'd like it to. So, but first and foremost, I think the most important thing is to focus on equity. So making sure that all students have access to the science learning. So we're going to focus on that today. The second stage or layer is, now that you've engaged and know your students have access to science learning, they're able to participate, then it's time to look at those ELD standards and say, okay, how am I using this opportunity to really develop language? And how is that actually helping students in their science learning? So it's that nice convergence of these standards were developed to help students with content learning. They were not developed as standalone standards. So how do we incorporate those into our science learning? Then that third stage, which is much more complex, and when you start really getting into it, and this is what we're going to focus on Thursday if you're able to join us, and that is using the ELD standards as the focal standards for the lesson. So we're looking, and this is where we've done a lot of wonderful work with Santa Barbara in actually developing lessons that are based on the ELD standards, that have a scope and sequence based on the ELD standards, but they're all done in the context of the FOSS science lessons. So they're very engaging for students, and they support the science learning. At the same time, they're developing that kind of language they need in order to learn content. So those are the three stages that I like to think about how we implement FOSS and ELD. So as I said, we're going to start with equity. And how we make sure all of our students are engaging in a really rigorous way in the science learning. So I thought we would, of course, because this is a FOSS, even though it's virtual, we're going to try to make this as hopefully hands-on as possible, and use a lesson to provide a context for our discussion around how we do this. So I'm going to start with, as I mentioned earlier, a multimedia feature that we have that goes with this module of sound and light, and it's to help activate prior knowledge, right? So students actually have these cards and they're talking about them and they're sorting them. And what's really lovely is that we have sounds that go with them, and I thought this is a perfect activity to do in distance learning because we can do this digitally very easily. So on your screen, you see the cards that students would see, and I'm going to see what sort of sounds you already know, and maybe what sounds may be new to you. And to make this a little more engaging for you all, hopefully, I'm going to challenge you to, in the chat, write down what you think that object, or there are some animals here too, what you think it is, but try to see if you're learning another language or you know another language other than English, what would the name of that object or animal be? All right? Are you ready? Show me a thumbs up if you're ready, although I can only see about 6 of you. All right. Let's see. Let's start with, let's start with this one. Something I wish I could do now. So did everyone get that? That was a avión, or a plane. All right, let's try another one. All right. That one's probably pretty easy. That's a frog. Let's see, how about this one? Well, that's my nemesis. Time. For some of you who are really young, you might not even know what that is. That's a digit, not a digital, an analog clock. All right, one more. What is this? So teachers, you might not have heard that for a while now. That was a pencil sharpener. All right. All right, enough of that. So again, purpose of this, to activate prior knowledge. What do students know? This might tell you that we can't assume that students have had experiences with all of these kinds of objects and animals and things like that. So before we get into actually having them describe these sounds, we want to make sure that they know where these come from. Okay, so I'm going to, let's see, go to the next slide here. And what our focus question is, so now we've listened to some of these sounds, so what actually causes sound? And that is going to be our focus question. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and come back to you. And, all right, where am I? Okay, so what is sound is our focus question. And if you can see here, I've got our focus question right up here. And I'm going to bring us a little closer. So I am going to actually change my camera to this camera that I have set up here is a little bit closer. All right, so we are going to use some object. So you use some object that you found in your home or wherever you may be. I happen to have a plastic cup. So for my English learners, I would put the name of that there, plastic cup. And we actually have these in Spanish too, so if you're doing a dual immersion, you can use that, those Spanish ones. We're also going to use a rubber band. And we are going to use a tongue depressor.
And I'm going to recommend everybody go to speaker view in the upper right-hand corner while Deanna's showing this.
Thank you, Erica. Yeah. And if you could pin me too, although I think if you just put it in speaker view, that should be enough so you can see this. All right, what was I going to say? Oh, I was going to mention that so these equipment cards, also a digital resource to print out from FOSS Web. And just thinking about how to make sure that students can engage in the activity by knowing, obviously these are easier terms, but as you get more complex in the equipment, you want to make sure students can name those objects. All right, so we have our cup. And I'm just going to explore a little bit with putting the rubber band here. And I'm going to pluck the rubber band. So I want you to focus very closely on the rubber band. And in the chat, if you wouldn't mind, just write, so put on your first grade kind of hat, and what might first graders, how might they describe what they're observing? What they're hearing or what they're seeing. Fortunately, if they were doing it at home, they could actually feel what's happening. So I'll give you just a few seconds to write in the chat, what do you observe? And while you're doing that, I'm going to add my tongue depressor here and see if we can observe something different. try it this way. All right. So bear with me. I'm going to switch my camera over because I want to introduce some vocabulary. And again, one of the biggest things I always say about when we're working with any students or anyone learning another language is to make it visual. So I've already drawn in my little replica here of the cup, the plastic cup and the rubber band. And I'm going to use the word wall cards that we also have on FOSS web to reinforce this idea of sound. So sound is what we hear. So I was able to hear when I plucked that rubber band a sound. So when I plucked, I'm going to just add that word here. When I plucked the rubber band, I actually observed a back and forth motion, right? So again, making this visual, however you can do this, we want to make it visual. So I observed that rubber band was making, and I'm going to just use this to show that it was moving. And that back and forth motion we actually call a vibration. So anything that's going back and forth like that is a vibration. So I know that's nothing new for you all, but we want, for students, this is a new idea, especially for first graders. And for fourth graders, right, we're also going a little bit deeper into, we might talk about what is that back and forth motion, what introduce waves, and that sort of thing. So that is how we might introduce the vocabulary. And again, there's other ways we could do that digitally. Sorry, I'm going to make sure I'm looking at the right camera here. So I want to move next to another way that we might think about and explore this idea. So I'm again going to, I just realized that my computer's running out of battery. Make sure it's plugged in. Thank you. I'm going to move, I'm going to share my screen. Again, if I can get my mouse here. There we go.
And while you're plugging in, Deanna is using two different devices, her computer and her phone, as I believe, as a nice way to show close up and further away. We're getting comments about that in the chat.
Right, so I have, when I'm looking, let's see, I'm not sure what you're seeing right now. Oh, you're seeing, yeah, you are seeing me. So this is just like a $40 little webcam that you'll see when I put on the other camera that we're just sitting on the desk. So we're experimenting with that. I gotta remember to look into it so you can see me. And now I am sharing, I'm attempting to share my screen. Yeah, there we go. And I really don't know how you teachers do this. So I want to make this visual. So this is where we're asking students to think about, again, instruments, things that are familiar to them that they might have seen, and we want to focus on things that are vibrating. So I put up an image, and this is something I would do in class with students, and we can easily do that digitally. And so I'm going to add a little bit of sound using my sound cards that I still have up. And I just want you to focus and kind of think about, if you want to close your eyes, about that bass fiddle. So think about what is vibrating, what is making a sound in that bass fiddle. All right, so I'm going to go back to, actually so now I'm going to go back to my other camera so you can see me. There we go. So this is the camera we were using to get the close-up. Again, just on Amazon, 40 bucks. And I'm going to come over here. So we have set up a table fiddle. And unfortunately, you know, I wasn't able to go up to the hall to get all the equipment, but we found one board and I just found another piece of wood. And so we were able to actually just make our table fiddle here so we could demo this with you. So I'm gonna, again, go to my close-up camera so that you can see the strings. Let's see if I can do this without dumping it. All right, so there's our table fiddle. Get this out of the way so you can see better. And I'm going to just demo here.
It's a little blurry, Deanna.
Yeah, I'm gonna just give it a second to focus. And you know, these things always work well when you do it before everyone's watching you. All right, that's pretty close. So I think you can see here that vibration. This is such a wonderful activity to do in the classroom, having kids come around, but it actually works distance learning as well, especially when you can get your camera in focus.
And is the webcam connected to your computer?
Yes.
Okay.
So Erica, if you can mute so that, okay, there we go. All right, so one thing we also use this to demo is that when if I touch the string, the vibration stops. I know there's a little bit of a delay here, but a very visual way for students to see that vibration. So sorry, I hope I don't make you car sick here for motion sick. I want to just demonstrate a little bit more of the sense making that we're trying to do with this. And sit down. And this is where we introduce cause and effect, right? So we want students to think about this cross-cutting concept of cause and effect. And one of the things that's actually in the investigation guide is to use whatever graphic organizer you're using for cause and effect, right? So when we plucked, that was our action, when we plucked the strings, the effect was we observed a vibration. And we also, if we could, we heard a sound, and we might have just felt that vibration. So we're introducing cross-cutting concept, using this to help students with their understanding, making sense of this idea. So old school, using a whiteboard, but trying to transmit that to students. We would do that in the classroom, and we can also do that through distance learning. All right, excuse me. So I want to just I'm going to share my screen again. Sorry for this back and forth. And I'm going to, so we looked at our table fiddle, we looked at cause and effect. So at this point, we would do a reading with students. And I'm sure you're all aware of the ebooks, just wanting to reinforce the idea that even that we're doing distance learning, the reading from the book is not science, okay? That's we still want to make sure students, even if you do the part where they get the instrument or whatever it is, or they're going outside and they're doing a journal, they're doing some journaling outdoors. Let's make sure that reading is reinforcing, or that it's after they've had an experience. Like we like to say that the hands-on experience is the front loading for the reading. So just making sure that students have an experience. Just want to make sure that that's clear. And what's nice about this reading is that it shows the equipment that students just used. So hopefully I would have asked my students to get a cup and a rubber band to do this activity, and then we would have done the reading. And then what I wanted to show was that it kind of challenges us to make a table fiddle. So again, this is something that we can easily do, and we can assign students to try and make one on their own. And so I'm going to stop sharing and come back to you. And just very quickly, I'm going to, I already have this made. And here's our table fiddle. So basically just book, I put some black paper on here so you can see it better. And we have our rubber bands. And this time we've added a paper clip so we can get a little better idea. Again, we're exploring this idea of vibration and sound, that when things move back and forth, that produces a sound. So vibration is sound. Okay, so the whole reason for bringing you through this was so that we can experience a sense-making tool. So Joanna is actually going to, am I sharing? No, I'm not sharing. Joanna is going to, hello there, take you through using the Jamboard. So this was a tool that we brought to our attention by teachers, and so we're hoping that a lot of teachers are using this tool, and it's just a great way to make things visual. And we thought, I know there's a lot of you there, so we're going to try and break you up into groups and just let you experience that. So I'm going to hand it over to Joanna to explain.
Can everyone see my screen? Just someone say yes.
No, well, I see you pointing at Jamboard.
Yes.
Yeah, go to Jamboard. Okay, so so Jamboard, like Deanna said, is a tool that folks have been using and happy with online to make sense. To do sense making with students, we need them to be in pairs or in small groups or circles. So this is one way that we're going to show you to do online sense making. And Jamboard is part of the Google Suite, so it's free. So if you were to shrink this screen, minimize it, and open up the link, Erica or Natalie can put the link in again of Jamboard. In your Google Drive, you would go to the 9 dots that's at the top and scroll all the way down, and Jamboard will be down there. But the link will just bring you there automatically. But that's where you find it, just so that you know that if you end up liking it and want to use it. So the directions are, I'm going to put you in breakout rooms, and you have to pay attention to what breakout room you are in. What's the number of your breakout room? Because you're going to go to the corresponding Jamboard page. There are like 20 pages. They're all the exact same page. And so you're going to go to those pages that correspond with your breakout room. And if you haven't used Jamboard before, there are like 4 tools. There's a pen, an eraser, a select tool, and a sticky note. So I am going to actually go there live so I can.
Joanna, I'm
yes.
sorry to interrupt you, but this is a big one. So I just went to that link and it says there are currently too many people viewing this file. Please try again later. And other people in the chat have gotten the same message.
Okay.
So perhaps you share your screen.
Yeah, I'm going to share my screen. Let me go there. So for those of you that, let's see. Yes, you can add images. really what we were asking kids here is to make a model to show what causes sound in this system. So you could use a pen. Somebody's already started working in here on page 1. You can use the pen to draw. You can move these sticky notes around. Somebody's moving that picture around right now as we're talking. You can move the vocabulary words around. And you can write phrases or words, explanation on your lines or on the side, like someone has done here. So this is a way for students to work, either the teacher with a few students, however many that is, to work, or students themselves, but most likely maybe a student might, the teacher might be on here. But as you can see at the very top center, there are many pages. And once you make one page, you can just duplicate it and make as many as you want. So if folks are on, I can put you in breakout rooms, but I'm not sure what's happening. So maybe, Erica, you can tell me, should I move forward with breakout rooms?
Well, let me tell everyone, I was trying to use Safari to get on, and that's where I got that message. And then I tried Chrome, and Chrome is working. So perhaps you give people 10 seconds to try a different browser.
Okay.
We'll put the link in the message again.
Chrome didn't work for me, though.
Say it again, Natalie.
Chrome did not work for me.
And Joe Snyder.
I think it was just too full.
Yeah,
Okay,
I was
so
in and I dropped out, and now I can't get back in on Chrome. So I think you'd have to have separate files for people to go to.
Okay. So what I'd like to do then is I want to put folks in breakout rooms so that you can talk about what are some of the online tools that you've used. If you happen to be on the Jamboard, you can talk about that. But what tools have you used that you have found successful to use with students, so that they can make sense of the content, and just share some of those ideas in breakout rooms? So I'm going to go ahead and do that.
Joanna, if
Yeah.
somebody in the breakout room is on, they can also share their screen, so at least they could be working on something for the breakout crew.
That would be great. So there'll probably be like 5 or 6 people in your room, and I'm going to create it now, let you be there for about 5 minutes and bring you back. And if you're not on, that's okay. Just introduce yourselves and have a conversation about tools you've used to make successful for students to make sense of content, to have a chance to talk, because that's what we need to do with our students. They need to be able to talk to each other and make sense.
All right. Oh, sorry about that. Didn't realize. So now we know there is a limit for how many can go into Jamboard.
Fortunately, you won't have that many students as
Yeah.
we have here today, 110, or about 100. And somebody, Maribel, wrote that Jamboard will open on a Google Classroom if you have a Jam code. So those of you who have Google Classroom.
Right. All right. Great. Well, I know that was just a little taste, but for any of you who hadn't used Jamboard, just wanted to show you, let you have an experience. Hopefully you were able to do that. You can also, of course, on your own time, go and just play around with it, but it's pretty simple and just a nice way to have a visual for students, and especially for older students who can actually go in and do that. But for primary kids, you could just actually use that just as your way of modeling how to make a model. So I want to show you one other thing, that another way to use a Jamboard that Claudio actually came up with that I thought was brilliant. And that is, a lot of you may be familiar with this placemat that we use. So this is usually something we students would put on their tables and use for small group discussions. And we usually have them put little markers. This actually came, I should give shout out to Oakland Unified that came up with this based on the work of Jeff Swires. But what is really a nice way to use this with Jamboard is that students could actually oops, I forgot I wasn't on Jamboard. Let me go to Jamboard and I can show you what it looks like. No. It should be right here. So you can actually, students can put names on their sticky notes, and then as they use the sentence frame to engage in their discussion, then they would put their name there and to show that they, oops, went away.
Click outside.
That they're using that sentence frame. So as a teacher, if you're going in there, you can actually see are students staying here where they're just kind of sharing ideas, or are they actually moving and using more complex language structures? And so the goal, of course, is to be able to move students to this column here where they're actually asking each other to elaborate and using that more academic language. So I just wanted to share with you, and these are available. You can take them and make copies of them. This placemat is in the Google folder, so you can use it however you would like. All right, I'm gonna get back into the PowerPoint here. And just, so the idea, so these are the ideas that came out of that investigation, and I just wanted to demonstrate how, okay, so this of course is an easy activity with cups and rubber bands, but you know, we could have explored our own instruments to see what was vibrating, and to get into those ideas around cause and effect, vibration and sound, using whatever instruments or items that students have at their disposal. And so just real quickly, again, I hope you observed that we introduced the vocabulary in context. So not just giving students vocabulary to write down. We all know that there's no learning in that way, that the vocabulary words are concepts, and that they should, in however way you can, make sure that those are introduced in the context of the learning experience. And then, of course, the same kind of scaffolds that we use for helping students to communicate their ideas, we can also use those digitally. And of course, having students write in their notebooks. I know we were with Capistrano yesterday, and they were talking about having notebooks, composition books for all students to come and pick up and then to be able to use at home. And that would be number one on my list, to make sure that students have notebooks so that they can continue to document their learning and their sense making in their notebooks. So I want to return to our first slide around equity and just kind of review these ideas. That first and foremost is we want to activate prior knowledge, right? We know that learning happens when we can connect it to something we already know, and our students come with a lot. They may be learning English. That does not mean they have gaps in their understanding about the world. And those are the things that we want to pull on and to activate and to leverage what our students bring to the classroom. They may have wonderful stories about the instruments that they brought and have a really deep understanding of how these instruments work. And we need to be able to access that, right? To start where students are. And then as we go into more complex ideas, let's make sure that we're using comprehensible input, making sure there's lots of opportunities to see vibration. We gave you about 3 or 4 different ways just in this kind of 20-minute lesson of what that looks like, and making things visual as much as we possibly can. And then, of course, you know, no learning in science is going to happen if you're not teaching science. I just want to put that out there that, you know, I know you're here because you believe science is important, and we need to be advocates. We need to make sure science does not fall off the table, that students this is the best way for students to learn English or whatever your target language is through an engaging content. And science, it can't be more engaging and more important, especially right now. So in inclusiveness, so we talked a little bit about that, and I just want to say, and we didn't talk about this, but I'm sure teachers, you all know this, that this social emotional learning comes first, and making sure that students feel like they are included in the conversation, they're included in the learning, all those things that I know that you're doing and you're going to have to focus on in the beginning of the year. and the challenge that is through distance learning. One other thing to mention is that we have to have high expectations for our students and not just fall into deficit modes or thinking about our students in terms of stereotypes, that every student has their own experiences, again, that they're bringing to the learning, and to tap into those and have those high expectations. And motivation, again, you all know, and speaking with teachers, and I know a lot of you all worry about kids tuning out. And so just really thinking about, well, what is it? What is it that's going to motivate my students? And want to just another shout out to Capistrano yesterday, talking about a teacher would mention that she had their kids bring rocks to the learning experience, and they were more engaged, right? It's just like that old show and tell. Everyone wants to bring something to the learning that's relevant to them. So what we demonstrated were things that are already, again, that embedded in the investigation guide, those ways to for students to access the learning. So these strategies that you just saw were right straight from our investigation guide. And what I want to get into, and we have about 15 more minutes, is to think about a little deeper about those, the ELD strategies, or not strategies, but the ELD standards, and what does that integrated ELD look like? And it really means being purposeful and identifying what are those language demands. So earlier when I had shown the practices and I showed those corresponding language functions, those are the demands, right? What is it that students, what are those cognitive tasks that involve language that students are going to need to engage in and that we are going to support? And the ELD standards are really as I said earlier, are designed to support that learning. They are not, again, just a list of grammar rules. They're ways of helping students engage in the learning. And so we need to be really intentional about what those objectives are. So we have a science, our science objective was what causes sound, but we need to go a little deeper than that and think about what are the literacy connections to that, and what are students, how are they going to be able to answer that focus question? So here's just an example of a very broad science-centered language objective. So focusing on that, I always start with the practice. So what is it which practice are students going to engage in order to demonstrate their understanding? And that's going to be a model, right? They're going to draw a picture and label it and be able to show their understanding of that sound is vibration, right? And that vibration, that back and forth movement causes sound, right? And they're going to do that orally and in writing. So just that very simple tells me where I'm going to focus in terms of the practices and in terms of what that literacy connection will be. And then the standards kind of help us pull back the language. So for those of us, for your native language, you don't really, it's invisible to you, those demands. You don't see them because you grew up hearing them. And the standards help us focus in on what those are for students that we need to help them with. So the main focus for today was to look at the part 1. So those are interacting in meaningful ways. And those just go so hand in hand with the science learning. They're exchanging information and ideas. They're thinking about or listening actively, asking questions, writing, they're offering their claims, they're supporting them with evidence. All of these are supported by the ELD standards. And so we want to make sure that we're hitting each of those boxes. So making sure there's time for students to engage in dialogue. Making sure that there's time for students to read, to listen to one another, and then to be able to communicate that understanding through writing and speaking. So I feel like I just talked for a long time, so I'm going to just pause for a second. And this is a PDF that's in the resource folder we shared with you. That's just a kind of summary of the part 1. I'm going to give you just a minute to look through those and just thinking about, again, so these are those standards. Which are the most impactful for you and your students where you are? And then maybe just jot down 3 or highlight them if you have the PDF open. 3 that you want to focus on this year in terms of your science instruction. So I'm just going to give you a minute to do that. All right, so I'm being prodded to move along. So I wanted to just introduce this ELD quadrant. This is found in the Science-Centered Language Development chapter, which you have access to. This is a way to help, at least for me, to help think about those different strategies that will help us to address those ELD standards and support the science learning. So we did some of these today. I just want to kind of quickly, since my time's running out here, go through some of those that you all are probably familiar with. A lot of GLAD strategies, guided language acquisition design. None of these are new, but and I'll just have to say, like, these are things that we know work. And how now our question is, how can we then translate these to digital learning? Because activating prior knowledge, comprehensible input, again, making sure we're providing plenty of visuals for students. And so the idea was to think about, so how might we use those in a digital learning experience? So I'm going to give you a minute, and because we have such a big group, instead of going into breakout groups, we thought if you could write in the chat a few ideas that you have that you could share, and what we'll do is we'll take those ideas and we'll get them all, and you could actually save the Zoom, the chat yourselves, or we will provide it for you. But what are ways that we can provide access to students in this green box here, using these same kind of ideas in a digital or a distance learning environment? So if you could share your little gems in the chat, we'd appreciate it. And Natalie or Erica, could you maybe, I can't see the chat, could you just maybe read a few?
They're going really fast. Monitor breakout rooms, students do short videos, interact with Padlet, Google Slides, videos, more about breakout groups. Here's one, with sentence stems in chat. Virtual and guided activities paired with a Jamboard or Flipgrid activity followed by reading the text on FOSS. A lot of Flipgrid comments, chat rooms and polls, Adobe Sparks. These are great. Use small group breakout rooms for students to have discussions. Use Flipgrid to give oral presentations. Kit inventory, interactive writing. LAUSD is encouraging Nearpod to provide more student engagement and interaction with lessons. A glass of water, sound waves are like ripples on water. I've heard good things about Pear Deck with Google. A lot of Pear Deck. I haven't heard of Pear Deck. Yeah. Read and write extensions to help students read and write. Seesaw as an app for students to share. Do you want me to keep going?
No, that's great. And thank you all for doing that. Just quickly, I wanted to also mention some things around those other categories of developing academic language. And I know some of I was thinking of doing the concept maps. I think that would work really well on Jamboard. And any of those things, I think, again, using the word walls, I think we demonstrated a lot of these things that we can do digitally as well. And then I think you all, and thank you for mentioning how important it is that oral practice, that and that those small groups, if you're not able to do breakouts, if you don't have Zoom or you're not allowed to have kids going into breakouts on their own, I know that's a district restriction, having just scheduling those small groups throughout the day so that students can practice, because language can only develop if we practice, right? They have to be able to have that oral practice. So you can continue to write your ideas in the chat, and I really appreciate you sharing those ideas. Wish we had more time to continue, but we will continue this conversation on Thursday when we're going to, so all of you who are on a nerd out on the ELD standards, please join us on Thursday, as we will dive even deeper into those. And as I said, look at how we use science as a context for designated ELD, so that time when it's ELD standards is the focus. So I'm going to turn it back over to Joanna to wrap us up here. And thank you all again for participating and for sharing your wonderful ideas.
Great, thank you, Deanna. So as I said at the very beginning, the FOSS team is developing resources to support a variety of instructional models for the 2020-2021 school year. And the resources will support different types of learning environments. And Erica or Natalie will put this link to our PD calendar in the chat. So we'll be supporting some of the tools we have are for in-person learning with district school recommended guidelines, remote learning, synchronous and asynchronous learning. And the team's working really hard at getting these tools and resources up on FOSS web. They'll just be coming on FOSS web at the end of the summer and into early September. So you can register at this link. And thanks for putting it in the chat. Again, these are the dates. So you can see we have 6, 8, 3, 5, K2 slots, and they're repeated. So it's the exact same. So if you attend 168, the next 68 will be the exact same thing. We just have different dates. So you only need to choose one date to attend whatever grade level band works for you.